Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Donna Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. And we are really ending strong with an incredible month that we've dedicated to industry enablers. So first, I wanted to thank Grand Sky and True Weather Solutions for sponsoring this entire month. And almost perfectly, we're ending on a company that does really cool stuff with weather. So we are really honored today to have with us Liz Osborn from Anemoment. It's a Colorado-based company. Yay, Colorado. And really excited to have Liz on. I also wanted to thank, before we talk to Liz here, Volatus Aerospace, because Volatus has been philanthropically sponsoring a whole bunch of companies, including Anemoment today, across this podcast as part of their Above and Beyond series. And we are just so thankful that we were able to have amazing people like Liz on the show because of Volatus. So again, thank you, Volatus Aerospace, for what you do and for your support. Absolutely. And finally, thank you, DroneLife. You know, DroneLife has been presenting this podcast since August of 2021, and we really appreciate them. And if you haven't subscribed to their YouTube channel, DroneLife TV, absolutely do that. And you'll keep getting these notifications at least through the end of this year for the Donna Drones. So, Liz, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Really glad to be here, Dawn.
Yeah, so everybody out there, by the way, we are live, so please jump in the chat, say hello, ask Liz your questions. We're going to be covering a lot of ground, actually more like a lot of air, a lot of weather today. So let's make sure you're asking her those questions that you have, because this show is really for you. So Liz, before we get into Anemoment and your company, tell us a little bit about your personal background.
Well, I'm a mom of 4 and a grandma of 3. We'll start there. I have a degree in law from the University of Colorado. And for some reason, I thought that the perfect 40th birthday gift for me was to become a lawyer. I don't know whether that was good or bad. My specialty in law has nothing to do with drones or science or tech. It actually is people with disabilities. But because our family business needed me, here I am. And our family business is Anemoment. The things I like to do when I'm not doing Anemoment, I love to play the piano. I even write little bitty songs because they're fun. And I like to do family history. I'm a genealogy buff, and my favorite thing is footnotes. I love footnotes.
Spoken like a true lawyer, right?
Yes.
And so everybody, fun fact, I met Liz, gosh, it was like over a year ago, I feel like, Liz. And I feel like it was at the UAS Roundup in Buena Vista, Colorado, where we met in human form for the first time. And, you know, and that's where we connected. And it was like we were both lawyers. And then you shared with me your story about how you kind of like the origin story of the company, and like this idea for anemometers, like over the kitchen table with your family.
Yes.
I love this story. Could you share it with us?
Absolutely. So sonic anemometry, which we'll talk more about what that means in a minute, originated in Colorado. The very first company that brought it to the world about 45, 50 years ago was here in Boulder County. My husband worked for that company for a while and learned about sonic anemometers, and he just couldn't get them out of his mind after he left that company. And so he had this idea to make it better, smaller, cheaper, lighter. And so he would play with that idea as our kids grew up and attended Longmont High School, which has a great STEM program, where they were studying physics and they were studying mathematics and calculus. Well, around our dining table, we would be talking about the mathematics that were behind sonic anemometry. And the kids would help Dad with, well, this is how we could do this, or this is how we might approach that with the math and the science. As they grew up, they helped become our testers. They helped build our 3D printers. They helped run the computers while I'll admit that we took them up and down, the Sonics up and down US 287 at very high rate of speed between Longmont and Berthoud many times during the original testing. And our kids helped us with those things. And so we have the whiteboard at our dining room because we're geeks and nerds that way. And whenever we have ideas, we'd write them on the whiteboard during dinner. And that's how the idea that eventually became Anemoment, through a lot of other people's help, came to be.
That's amazing. And I love that you have a whiteboard in your living room. I mean, and so like when you think about a family business, I mean, you are the epitome of that, clearly. Just that story proves it. But what I want to do first, Liz, before we dive deep into all the things, about your sonic anemometer and what makes it so unique and all the different use cases, the people out there, like, by the way, Mickey Flanagan, who's saying good morning. Hello, Mickey. Thank you for the shout out. Before we get into that, I'd love to roll that short video. So if we could roll that video, we're going to go ahead and check out a little bit about Anemoment now.
From the lightest breath to the heaviest gale, wind moves, carries, influences, and changes the environment. And to know the wind, where it's going and how fast, is to know how to better interact with and care for our world. We are Anemoment. We know the wind. We make meteorological instruments to improve the climate model. Our primary product is the Trisonica Mini Ultrasonic Anemometer. Inside the Trisonica Mini is a custom computer and special sensors to send and detect sound waves. Then it adds math and physics, all at high speed, to immediately tell about the air passing through it, including three-dimensional wind direction, wind speed, air temperature, air pressure, and humidity. On board also are a compass and a tilt sensor, so the Trisonica Mini can do more than stand on a tower. It can float under a balloon, ride on a storm-chasing van, and fly on a drone. Gone are the days of moving parts and bulky, power-hungry wind sensors. This solid-state anemometer is about the size of an apple, about as heavy as a tennis ball, and gives precise weather data on little power. Researchers all over publish new discoveries using Anemoment products, revealing more about global and local climates. More than 300 Trisonica Minis are now in use worldwide. But we are working with other companies, from fresh startups to Fortune 500 players, to deploy more. We are a Colorado company headquartered in Longmont, with manufacturing in Denver using circuit boards from Denver and glass-filled nylon plastic bodies from Colorado Springs. Welcome to our website. Please explore to see all our products and how people around the world are using them. We are Anemoment. We know the wind. Thank you.
So cool. I love it. So everybody, if you're just tuning in now, by the way, Olga is with us. She's a regular. We love Olga. She also comes to our clubhouse quite regularly. So hello there. We are with Liz Osborn from Anemoment. Not only is she a pianist, a lawyer, a genealogist, but also an artist, because the video you just saw, that was not only her voice that was narrating it, but all of that art was done by her. It looks very much like something you would have been drawing on your whiteboard there in the dining room, Liz. But I love it. It's a great video. And honestly, the first time I met you, I was like, what is an anemometer? Like I'd never heard of that, right? It's not something like in normal parlance that people are like, oh yeah, like my anemometer. So just to kind of foot stomp that, let's throw that definition out there again. Like what exactly is an anemometer? What does it do?
Well, I'm a word person, so let me start with how the word tells us what it is. Anemo is that old Greek for atmosphere or wind. Meter, of course, tells us we're measuring something. So it's it's a tool to measure the wind. When I was a Cub Scout leader, we had a rock that would tell us about the wind. If the rock was moving fast, you knew you had a big wind. But over time, people developed better and better ways to measure wind. You see anemometers all the time. At the top of the Home Depot here in Longmont, you can see a little silver one spinning. as you drive down the highway, you might see one that has 3 prongs, and that is a sonic anemometer that can measure in 2 dimensions. So basically, an anemometer tells you information about the wind.
So why are they so important to drone operations?
Well, oh boy, I could go on that forever.
We've got a lot of ground to cover, so not too long.
Not too much. Okay, so the thing is, drones are themselves very light relative to the highly powerful winds that nature creates. And if we want to direct where we want our drone to go, we need to be aware of the effect and the direction and the pressure of the wind. And so knowing what winds do affect whether we can even fly or not.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, but the anemometer measures so much more, and I want to break it down just a little bit because, maybe there's a bunch of drone pilots out there, like Rob Cranston, by the way, saying hello, hi, everybody, great demo video. Everybody loves your video.
Thanks, Rob. The thing about being a startup, you have to do all the hats.
It's really cool, though. Let's break down. So you talked about wind, but let's talk about temperature, right? Like your anemometer can measure that. So why is temperature also important?
So let me step back a second. An anemometer itself just measures wind. When it has certain equipment, it can also measure the direction. When we add other features to it, such as in the sonic anemometers that we make, and here's a picture of how.
Now, which one is this? What is that one called?
This is the Trisonica Mini. And then I have over here our newest one, which we'll talk about in a bit, the Trisonica Sphere. And both of them have additional features to being able to measure the wind. And that's some of what you're talking about. When we add in the ability to measure temperature, pressure, and humidity, that gives more data. So you asked starting about temperature. Yep. Why does temperature matter? Air density changes according to temperature. Anyone that remembers playing with smoke and freezers, I don't know, 4th grade science. I don't know if they still do this, but we used to do a lot of things with cold ice and freezers and dry ice and stuff like that. But cold air is more dense because it's contracted, and so it pushes down. Warmer air pushes up, and that's what gives us the weather cycles that we have. And so there's layers in the atmosphere where it's warmer or colder, and it can even be different at different layers. We're flying drones through these layers, and we need to know what's happening at those different layers. And that's why temperature matters, because it gives us a sense of down push or up push because of the density of the air.
I've only flown recreational a couple times, full transparency here, but I've been in all the different group chats. I've talked to a lot of drone pilots. Temperature seems to be a huge factor when it comes to battery life. So I guess amongst other things, that's a significant reason why you'd want to really understand temperature when you're flying.
Let me give an example that people, especially in Colorado this time of year, are probably familiar with. The reason hot air balloons are used early in the morning is we're making use of that difference between the cold air of the morning and the hot air in the balloon allows it to rise. And that's the same kind of thing that happens with the drone. When you have that different air pressure, it can go to different places better or not.
Gotcha. Okay. And let's see. What about humidity then? Like, humidity in my brain, because I used to live in Tampa, Florida, right? It's just like this wetness, right? That like covers everything. How is like humidity? That's like moisture in the air, and that's different from temperature, which is the hotness or coldness.
I see that some of the people in the chat already are figuring out the answers to this. Humidity matters to air density. And the interesting thing is we feel that humidity on us and we feel like it's a pressure on us, but ironically, humid air is lighter than dry air. And so knowing, again, it has to do with the density, how much the rotors on a drone are having to push against the air, what air is there for it to push against. All those things can affect how well the drone flies.
Got it. Okay. Yes. Morgan McCauley is out there saying air density, altitude, throwing it all out there. And Rob Cranston had jumped in again and said, totally get the startup mojo. How do you incorporate? So this is a great question.
Rob. We'll get to that.
Okay. Rob, hold on your command and control question. We're going to get to this after we kind of go through The last thing I think that I wanted to cover, well, maybe not. We wanted to talk about a couple more things. Pressure. Tell me about pressure and tilt. They're two different things.
The pressure, actually, the humidity, temperature, and pressure aren't as directly related to drone control. They are on our unit because they're used for detection purposes, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The tilt matters a great deal. A drone doesn't necessarily fly horizontal, especially when it's fighting. You watch a drone and it goes this way, and so the wind is being measured relative to the device, and if it's tilted, well, how do you solve for that? Having a tilt sensor inside the device, then we can use the math. That's that math and physics part. We can use the math to help the user back that information out and get the actual wind direction.
Okay, and and I know it was in your video, but you had your anemometer, the Trisonica, a little bit diagonal there. That presumes that it's like flying on the drone with the drone.
Right. It does go on the drone. That's the exciting thing, and that's the real killer app for us, is putting it on the drone. Not only for, we can have it on the drone to measure what the conditions are at launch and landing, but what is really useful for drones is making drones more useful. You said industry enabler. We're enabling the gathering of weather data in places that were never before reachable, like say over the Niagara Falls or something. How do you put a weather monitor over the waterfalls? Well, a drone can go there.
Wow, I know we're gonna talk about that, and hopefully maybe some of your partnerships. But let's talk about just two more things. Kind of what the different sensors that are on the Trisonica. First of all, yours is sonic. Like I think you alluded to this earlier, that it's what, 2-dimensional, or it measures. Explain that.
Okay, so you saw that part in the video where it says it's sending a sound this way and a sound that way, a sound this way and a sound that way. And that's where we put in the math and physics. I'm going to do the very lightweight thing. When you sound, let me back up. The speed of sound is dependent on the medium that the sound is being sent through.
Okay.
So when we know the distance between where the sound is going, which is, say, coming from here and it's going to here, this is really tiny, going from here to here. We know exactly how far apart that is with precision down to the micron level. We know how far apart those are. So when we measure the sound going one way and the sound going the other way, and there's a difference, we can use that difference to tell us about the medium that is going between there. And that's how we back out the information on the wind speed. When we have multiple paths, we get wind direction. It also gives us temperature. And these are all things that are in high school physics that nobody remembers except people that are playing on the whiteboard. And so that's why it's sonic. That means we can get this wind information without moving parts. And that's a big advantage. Ours is 3-dimensional. This one does part of 3-dimensional. And the nice thing about having a 3-dimensional wind direction, if you've been out there watching here in the Northern Hemisphere, the leaves fall and you get that nice wind blowing and the leaves are doing this thing, or they're doing this thing, or they're going around. Wind, we all think of wind as being straight across. No, it moves all sorts of ways. So we want to not only know, is it coming horizontally from a direction, but also coming vertically. The Trisonica Mini can tell us about 15 degrees of the vertical because our body gets in the way a little bit. Our new Trisonica Sphere, though, can tell us about all of the vertical wind as well. And so knowing all of that, and that really matters for drones because you need to know about those down pressures and those up pressures from the wind. So sonic means that there's no moving parts.
Okay, awesome. And Morgan McCulley has a really good question. Can you also measure air pollution with any of these?
That is such a great question, Morgan. And what we do is our sensor for the wind is often paired by our customers with sniffers. And they are sniffing for things using their drones. So the sniffer says, oh, we have something here. When we add the wind and the temperature and the pressure information, we are able to also determine the density of that air pollution and how widespread it is, and even flying the drone toward the source, identify the source. But we don't, our product doesn't do that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Alone, it doesn't do that, but
Right.
coupled with other things that you work with.
Right.
Because we're going to talk about some of your use cases, and I remember there was a methane one. I mean, heck, you had a cow fart in your video, and
Yep.
for a reason.
Yep.
For those that you go back and roll it if you missed it, it was right up front.
Excuse me. Yes.
Kind of hilarious, but so let's get into the features. You started alluding to these. Obviously, let's talk about the mini first.
Okay.
You can fit it in your hand, right?
Yep.
It's very compact. How much does it weigh?
In this configuration, because we also have one that has a flat base, this configuration is 60 grams.
And what is that? What is that like US like measurement, like ounces or?
A little under 3 ounces.
Oh wow, super light. Okay,
Yeah, very, very light. It's about the weight of a tennis ball. You pick up a tennis ball, it feels about like that.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
so that's the advantage for it. I mean, other people have been making sonic anemometers for the past 50 years. They're large, they're bulky, they're heavy. The uniqueness of the Trisonica Mini is it's so light that it can go on a drone easily without drawing a lot of use time from the drone.
Well, that was my next question. Is it powered by a battery? What kind of does it take energy, or how does it exactly work?
It does require energy, and the best way to do it is to power it from the drone battery. We make the sensor, our users decide exactly how they're going to use them, and the most common use case is they're plugging it into the drone's battery. But because it uses so little power, it doesn't, by drawing power, shorten the life of the mission very much.
So I have in my notes here, Liz, like a bunch of like acronyms and like
okay, yeah,
5-32 VDC at 30 MA
milliamp
power. What does that mean?
That's where I know what those mean. Can I explain what they mean? Maybe not. 5-32 means volts direct current, meaning that there's a wide range of batteries you can connect it to and it will work. So people have different batteries that they're using to plug it to make their drones go. Well, it's going to fit what you're using. That's what that part means. 30 milliamps power means just a itty bit of power is being drawn to make it go.
Okay, that's important because that is probably one of the biggest, I think, complaints that I hear from the pilot community is, the battery life, the battery life, the battery life. So, if you're drawing from that battery, but it's like minuscule, then no biggie. And we talked about the no moving parts, but tell me a little bit about your other anemometer. Show us again the newer one.
The sphere.
Okay. The sphere. Tell us.
Yes.
So why did you create that? Like it's so different from
and it is heavier. It is heavier. It's larger. And that's because, let me pick which parts I want to talk about. Let me just say that this one weighs 200, so a quarter kilo, about a half pound, a little quarter pound. It's a little heavier. And the reason we came up with it was we wanted to have the more full of the vertical. And that's because flux measurement is really important when you're measuring those things like the pollution or emissions. Knowing the whole flux of what's happening with the air and the particles in the air matters. And so we needed to have that up and down.
I'm like laughing in my brain when you say flux. I think flux capacitor, right? Like I'm like, oh yes. God, I don't do public math, and all I know about science is kind of from movies. I was one of those horrible science students, although I did take some advanced science classes.
It's like a flux capacitor, and it's enables you to do things we couldn't do before. So we'll think
there you go. There you go. So I want to go back to Rob's earlier question. Rob Cranston talked about how do you incorporate this kind of wind weather data into a command and control app?
I have to admit that that's not our specialty part.
Okay.
What the Trisonica does, and here's the bottom of one, same thing here with the sphere. You connect a cable. The cable on the other end goes to your drone and to your product. And the reason we don't have a specific app is that everybody is using it slightly differently. And we want people to have the full range of capacity to use the information. A lot of people who are using it on drone, if they want to get the data back to the ground immediately. They're attaching the output, the data output that's coming out of here, because the brain's inside here. So it's spitting out the data already. They can put it with their Pixhawk or their radio or their whatever they are using to get information back to ground. And so then they develop their command and control app. They might feed it in. They say, okay, I can put wind in or whatever, but we're trying to make something usable by as many people as possible. So we aren't doing that part.
So it's plug and play basically, right?
Yes.
And I think this is a related question. So Ron Joseph is asking, how is the telemetry transmitted back to the control station? Is it Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, UHF, VHF, something else? You said there's a connection there.
Okay, so the connection allows to use a data protocol, a serial data protocol, and it just puts out the data. You, the user, are going to plug it into your telemetry or however you're sending it back to your base station. In other words, it's intended to piggyback on what you're already using.
Gotcha. Okay, so piggyback. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So that makes a lot of sense. And Morgan says she wants one. So I know we're probably getting that to the end, but like just how do, like, just through your website, or, oh, she's asking you to DM her maybe on LinkedIn.
We can do that, but our website is we've got a couple different channels of sales, but the easiest and most direct one is go to the website, request a quote, and you'll get an email back from me personally telling you what the next steps are.
All right, very cool. Now, obviously Morgan wants one, but man, you have so many use cases that people are, as you said, kind of plug and playing, piggybacking off of what they're already doing to add more fidelity to the data they're getting. Let's talk about, I want to start with the methane one, just because, this methane monitoring, it's a really big deal. I mean, we were joking about cow farts earlier, but, it was like a year ago when I went to the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit in Houston, Texas, the EDRCs. By the way, great group of folks. If you're not following them, you should be. They're going to be having an event again in Houston, June 12th through the 14th in 2023. So if you care about the energy sector or drones and robots in it, you should be there. Anyway, it was at that event that they have a methane summit, almost like a co-located event. And I sat through some of that. It was the first time I fully appreciated not only we'll geek out legally here, Liz, all the legal compliance requirements for the energy sector when it comes to methane emissions, but then how drones are making such a huge difference, especially with all these different sensors being incorporated. So tell us, I think you collaborated with the university to develop a high precision sensor for drone applications for this with the anemometer or without.
I'm not sure what you're talking about with the university, but let me talk generally, because again, our product is meant to piggyback on what other people are doing. And there are several universities and government groups. Los Alamos is one. We have, I'm just looking at Embry-Riddle is another. They put our sensor with the sensors they're using. And what happens when you add wind information, wind and temperature and pressure information to the detection of molecules like methane, like nitrous oxide, like sulfur, then you're able to really mitigate. You're able to get that information that says, okay, this is where it's happening, or this fixes it, those kind of things. That's some of our favorite use cases to be able to identify. You mentioned climate toxicity is something that people are very concerned about. And there's a company called, I love their name because searching for it is always fun. They're out of Denmark, and they're called Explicit, of all things. And what they do is they have taken Trisonica minis, a pair of them, they put them on a drone, and then they fly the drone around the plume of a ship at sea to be able to tell whether the ship is emitting, in this case, sulfur and nitrous oxide, to know whether or not it's exceeding the international MARPOL standards. And so that's one of our favorite things. They've been very successful at saying, okay, these ships are compliant, these are not, and you need to do something about it. I think wherever compliance with emissions and climate toxicity cause people to spend money, you're going to find a real use for drones that are equipped with these kind of detectors.
Wow, that is such an important series of use cases for society and for our planet in general.
Yeah.
Speaking of our planet, Liz, right? We've seen extreme weather over the, especially it just seems to be ramping up over the last couple of years, right? Like the world has been on flipping fire, like literally, right? So, lots of interest in the United States government with putting some money against wildland firefighting efforts and what does that look like? Tell us how your anemometers are being used in wildfire atmospheric research.
Great one. Both the United States and Australia, there's a lot of research going on that uses the trisonic anemometers on drones in two ways. One is during a fire, the drone can go observe and monitor in places that you couldn't otherwise. You don't want to put people in harm's way, or you want to warn whether people are in harm's way. San Jose State was working on this, had it on a drone, and they're able to take it to the top of a ridge. And now we can park the drone there and determine, is wind coming up this ridge? Is it going to endanger homes or firefighters? We don't have normally weather information is gotten from those standardized towers that spend a lot of money, put them in place beforehand. But fires don't care where you have a tower. So being able to put
Right.
it on a drone really matters. Another thing that is also being researched is what is the effect during the fire? And a drone can go over the fire when it's got both an anemometer and a detector for the particles. You can see there's a group that's looking to see what microbes are being spread by the fire. And so there's a lot of things that are being done with drones and with detection methods, including the sonic anemometer that we produce, find out more about how fires behave and keeping people safer.
Well, we just had Hurricane Ida in Florida, and I imagine fires aside, just any natural disaster, like, my brain goes right to, my time in the military and working, exercises, some real world scenarios where, you have a mobile command post, on site, whether it's like you said, before, during, post recovery. But I imagine, and it kind of harkening back to your video, the little truck you had with the little anemometer on top, so not only are they plug and play in different command and control systems, but also, as you said, on different vehicles. So you can use the drone, fly through these weather, different layers of weather that we just don't have that information for without this kind of technology.
Right.
And also on that mobile command post or near it, if you have the newer one that you just created, the wind, the sphere wind flux sensor.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do have people that use them in that way. One of the nice things about them being so light and so plug and play is that when a more permanent installation has been damaged, you can install these right away temporarily until you repair the permanent installation. And we've had that use seen many times.
Oh yeah, so even just like kind of a temporary emergency,
Right.
Have these little guys in your emergency kit, right? Like you just pop them out when you need them and throw them on a drone or on a tripod.
And that's another use for the compass and tilt is you don't have to worry about getting precisely in place just right now, because you can use the compass and the tilt to say, okay, we subtract this out and now we have the actual wind data. There was one more, but I totally forgot it. So we'll just go on.
No, this is great stuff. And so we kind of talked about the wildfires, we talked about the hurricanes. You guys are also involved in monsoon research.
Oh yes, and that is Embry-Riddle, and that's exciting. They put the Trisonica Mini on the front of a fixed wing drone, which was really a neat thing to see. They helped solve the problem of where do we put it on a fixed wing, because underneath you've got all the things that make it fly moving the wind more than the wind itself, but we stuck it out the nose and it worked really well. The thing about monsoons is they are to date unpredictable and they drop a lot of water. And what Embry-Riddle is trying to understand is what are the conditions that cause the clouds to decide here is where we're going to drop the water. Part of that has to do with boundary layer. There, you all have experienced boundary layer in that close to the earth, the air is kind of sticky to the earth and it moves at close to the speed that the earth is moving, but up higher it moves much faster. And as those of you who have flown into Denver, you know, you come through and all of a sudden boom 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 boom, and then you're coming in smoothly. That
Fun
boom boom boom
times.
boom boom, yeah, that boom 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 happens at the boundary layer, the boundary between the air that's sticky to the earth and the air that's moving fast above it. And drones are part of identifying where and how the boundary layer forms, behaves, why rain drops, those kind of things. And the sonic anemometer that we make helps with those.
Wow. Yeah. So these boundary layer studies in addition, that's
Yeah.
so cool. You know, I know you're working with Don Bershoff, True Weather, who is the sponsor of this month.
Yeah.
You know, Don has been proselytizing weather far
That's a good
and
word for what he's
wide.
doing it.
You know, he's made me an acolyte because, you know, just like you, he's so good at explaining in just layman's terms why this is important. The fact that we just have such a dearth, you know, a lack of solid weather data, you know, from that boundary layer, like you said, below, like that low altitude weather, as he calls it, data desert, you know, that he's trying to fill. So can you, are you at liberty to elaborate in the ways that you're working with True Weather?
I think I'm at liberty to elaborate in the ways that he's said publicly, so we can
Okay,
explain
then do that.
What what we provide, what our product provides to the True Weather goal is a relatively robust and inexpensive way to get micro weather data. They are very interested in getting data that covers the minute and the meter, where we know what's happening within the last minute and the last meter. Right now in the United States and around the world, weather data depends on whether, do we have a tower there? Do we have a weather station there? Do we have someone to report it? What I think Don is aiming for is to have, at least starting with, by block, what is the weather happening in my neighborhood today, and the next neighborhood over, and the next neighborhood over. And when you know what's happening in a whole series of neighborhoods, then you start to predict, okay, we're having this happening here. This derecho is marching across Iowa. We'll be able to say, okay, y'all need to get everything in and give advance warning. I think the other thing is when you know how the wind is behaving among the structures in a neighborhood, that's where we begin to enable drone delivery, because the buildings in a neighborhood affect how the wind is moving, because it bumps into the side of house and then it goes this way, you know.
Right.
And so having that detailed information depends on having sensors that close together. And I think that's about as far as I can go with what we're doing with Dawn.
No, you know, that it makes a ton of sense. And I mean, gosh, Liz, you're in Colorado. I'm in Colorado. You're up near where you said Longmont. Right. I'm in the Springs, and it's funny because I was just watching TV the other day, and it was one of the weather guys, and he was explaining like, hey, you should use our app because we give up to the minute, right? It's almost like the minute mile. Like he's like, you could be in Colorado Springs, but if you're in Pueblo, you're going to have a totally different forecast, or just, you know, 10 minutes down the road. But even neighborhoods, like you said, I'm in Northgate area. Monument is like a 5-minute drive, but because it's on a hill and the elevation goes up like 2,000 feet from where I am, like the Monument Hill is a nightmare in the winter. Like we could get 4 inches. They're going to get a foot. And just having that level of fidelity, I think, is really, really important, especially when, as Don has explained it, you know, so many of these forecasting models are inaccurate. And what it does, you know, and of course, they're going to err on the side of caution. And so what you have are canceled flights when perhaps flights could have flown, and, kind of that return on investment, especially like you said, for drone delivery, that's going to be a really big deal. So, I love that you're working with him. I love what he's doing at True Weather, and I think it's awesome. And, really when you think, you talked about almost like urban, operations, whether it's drone delivery or whatever, just think beyond visual line of sight. I mean, it's one thing if you have, like you said, towers around, or you have a person watching that can see things happening. But when you are true BVLOS, like you need like the minute, the mile weather that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I was thinking, I happened to read a report, because for some reason I like to read reports when I'm trying to fall asleep, from a National Transportation Safety Board, of a crash that happened on a flight many years ago between Denver and Colorado Springs. And the reason that it crashed was, coming off of Pikes Peak was a wind that, when it came down to the plains, it started doing this.
Oh gosh.
This horizontal rotation. You can't see that. You cannot see that. And the plane caught its wing in just one edge of that rotation, and it flipped the plane over. And the same thing happens with drones. And we need to have this weather information, especially if we're flying outside the line of sight, because we need to know, stay out of this current tunnel or something like that. The other thing that goes with that, last year here in Boulder County, a drone operation out of University of Colorado caught a wind that it wasn't expecting, and it crashed and started a small wildfire that affected several farms and homes and things like that. And so when we aren't able to see, we need to keep as safe as possible. Knowing the wind helps keep drones safe.
Well, I was just working with a client on, which I'm not going to get into great detail right now, but, how do you get that BVLOS waiver? And I imagine, and actually, if you go, this is transparent, you can go on the FAA's website. They literally have a guide that talks about, it's a BVLOS like waiver and explanation guide or something. It's like the WSEG or something. And one of their like 8 questions for BVLOS to get that waiver, because it addresses all waivers, is, how do you determine weather? Like, how do you determine, right? Cloud height, things like this, because there are some things in Part 107 that actually directly address weather. And so they ask you when you're applying for one of these waivers, like, what are you doing? I imagine if you say, I've got an anemometer on my drone, or, I'm working, it would make like probably a lot more, easier. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think so. So.
I would think so as well. Where we are like just a couple minutes out. I don't know if there's like another question in there that I can't quite read, but let me ask you this. Are there any big announcements you can talk about right now? I love doing reveals on the show. If not, that's okay.
There are not that I can, but I would say this, speaking of weather, the American Meteorological Society's big show is coming to Denver this year, January 8th through 12th. And if you would like to have an admission pass, if our listeners would like to have an admission pass and see the technology relating to weather, I realize it's kind of tangential to the drones, but it's fascinating stuff. They've got great displays. It's fun times. It's January 8th through 12th. Send a message to info@anemoment.com, and we'll make a list of people that are interested in being able to go there.
Well, that would be cool. I might be able to maybe swing up there. I'll be going to CES the week before that in Vegas.
Right.
And speaking of Denver, everybody, couple big shows next year. Liz, I don't know if you'll be involved in Geo Week. Diversified Communications puts that on, just like they do Commercial UAV Expo. That's going to be in Denver, like the second week of February.
It's the time to be in Denver. Yeah,
it is. Denver. And AUVSI Exponential will be in Denver May 8th through the 11th. And so absolutely visit us here in Colorado. I'll be doing my Law Tech Connect workshop again. So talking about the legal policy issues out there, really excited. So hopefully you can all join us. But we are getting close, super close to our time here. So Liz, I know you mentioned it before, but let's mention it again. How can people get in touch with you? How can they learn more about Anemoment the best way?
Go to our website. You can reach us from there, anemoment.com, ANEMOMENT.com. And let me tell you about that name. Mom is in the middle because I'm mom. So that's middle.
I love it. Well, I love that, the whole drone industry are your children and you are bringing them weather information that they really need. So any closing comments, Liz, before we sign off?
Just thank you and pay attention to the weather. It's changing here in Colorado today. Thank you for your time.
It is. And everybody, just a reminder, tomorrow on Drone Law Connections, 1 p.m. Eastern, we're going to kick off our new month theme with Mission Go, who is our sponsor. We have Chris Cognati. He is the president of Mission Go. I know you've heard of them because they're doing crazy, great stuff about medical drone deliveries, first organ deliveries with a drone. I mean, they're working with Airspace Link, doing all kinds of amazing things. So join us tomorrow on Clubhouse. And that's all she wrote. I don't want to go too much over, but thank you, everybody. Thanks for your comments. Thank you for joining in the chat and for your positive encouragement. We appreciate all of you. We're out here.